Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Oh, hi. Welcome. Now that we've put on our cardigan and taken off our outside shoes and put on our inside shoes, as Mr. Rogers would do. Dan, I have a big announcement.
Okay.
I am announcing my retirement from Woodland because the Lakers have a $70 million 6-year deal just waiting for a head coach, and Hurley turned it down to go back to UConn. And so I think that's my call. I think I need to go help them out.
Well, they certainly need your help. So, I mean, I'll say that.
They need something.
Yeah.
70 million, 6 years.
Yeah.
Oh, could you?
I don't know, man. It's going to be tough, managing the Lakers and the media and all of those big egos, and then also doing the MuseCast. That's going to be tricky. That's going to be...
Get out of the MuseCast. How are you going to juggle it all? Yes, the MuseCast trains me well for the firestorm of media coverage. Oh, God.
That's right.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, just jokes in case you were wondering. They have not yet. Wait, let me make sure my phone's working because they have not yet called. But
it's their loss.
Hey, that totally. I mean, I want to say, and we're going to get into it, but thank you for your sermon on Sunday. It was called The Heart of Worship. I knew it. I had it. I knew it.
I'm so honored that you remembered it.
I can't remember Greg's sermon to save my life, his titles.
Yeah.
I can remember The Heart of Worship. So there you go. No, I just want to thank you for it. I was so nervous because beforehand we chatted a little bit, and then in the Saturday night, a lot of things can happen on the Saturday night run through, and then when you got up and you were like, hey, it's been an honor learning with you guys and worshiping with you guys if I get fired. So I was like, holy buckets, I got to be here for my brother. What's going down? And then I was like, oh my goodness, no, I'm very thankful. I thought that was really lovely. And so I just want to say that thank you. I know you're going to do a summary of your own sermon. That'll be great. We'll have some reactions from this side of the screen, from on this side of the camera. That would be me. And then we'll give you an opportunity to share some of the stuff that you had to leave out without giving too much away for what's coming next, because, it's chapter 5 is coming. And then we'll have some lovely nugget time, and then we'll go about our gloomy, rainy day.
Yeah, gloomy and rainy for sure. Let me switch to the gallery view. And so the sermon is called The Heart of Worship, and I had a whole bunch of other titles, and so I actually didn't know it was called that until Saturday night. So, so
that's the one.
That's the one. That's the one they picked. Yeah.
Wait. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Dan. Before you get into your summary, we have to acknowledge your lovely haircut. We talked about it last week that it was coming, and we got it. We're looking nice and ready to go. Very professional. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I'll say that I have a hairstylist, Rachel, and she's been great. She's been my hairstylist for 4 years. This is her last haircut. She's moving, and she's moving down to Rochester, and so I said, cut it twice, so I can make sure.
Let's set aside some cash from the MuseCast budget to get you a chartered private flight, you can get to Rochester.
I tell you, I would like that. I would like that. So but thank you. I gotta cut short, and it's ready for summer. So hold on, I have a note here. What does this say? This might be very important. Hold everything.
Oh,
Never mind.
Everything.
Never mind. That was just that was a crazy idea I had for something else. Never mind. So okay, let me do the summary before I go totally off the rails. This is called The Heart of Worship, and really how I started off is I was really looking at we're in the throne room still, where both Greg and I, it's hard to resist dipping our toes into chapter 5 because there's some really cool stuff there. And I think Greg is going to finally step into chapter 5 this weekend. And it's sort of like the magic of the book really gets revealed in chapter 5, kind of the magic trick. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Prestige, but there's like these 3 steps to a magic act. There's I can't remember the first 2, the setup and the turn, and then the prestige. The prestige is the big reveal that shocks people and wows people. And that happens, I think, in chapter 5 in the book of Revelation. So we're both kind of tempted to kind of dip our toe in there, but we're still actually technically in chapter 4. And we've got this incredible picture of the throne room. And this is the center of heaven. And so we get this glimpse into heaven. And that's why we call this sub-series Good Heavens. And so it's been really fun to kind of see what some of those images mean. And but I think that, like, I think we all carry a lot of weight about and questions, and there's a lot of mystery around what's heaven like, and is it even possible, and what is eternal life like, and and there's all sorts of questions like, do I have free will in heaven, and so I kind of looked at this part, and there's this text that talks about what these elders on these thrones are doing in the throne room forever and ever and ever. And frankly, it kind of disturbed me a little bit for a long time, because if that's literal, then man, that doesn't look like joyous at all. It looks pretty miserable to be stuck in this monotonous loop of doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I started to unpack that, and the way I did that is, first of all, I kind of showed why you don't have to take this literal in terms of John's description of what they're doing, but rather John is saying something that we do have to take as serious. And so that's kind of the first step. And you can kind of see this because, first of all, it's an apocalyptic text. Secondly, there's little tells in the text itself that says, hey, don't take this literal. And then the second thing I did is I kind of went on this really crazy rabbit trail, because I want to find out, okay, if you don't take John's description literal, well, then how do you know what John is saying? And I went on a really wild rabbit trail that kind of helped me see what might actually be going on underneath. And that rabbit trail had to do with creativity, where we tend to think of creativity as creating something, and in a sense we are, but it's really more making something. And the way I showed that is that I shared a couple haiku, and a haiku is a 3-line poem where there's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. So like Dan is a teaching pastor, that's 7. And so Dan is a great guy, that's 5. Dan is a bozo. Dan is a bozo. Yeah, that's 5 too. So so that's how it works. So you go 5, 7, 5 in the haiku. Now I shared a couple that I wrote, and I showed how those haiku that I wrote, in order for me to write those, they have to be possible to be written. I can't write something that's not possibly written. So like my haiku, a great reunion, Jesus and his disciples, I'll set the table. That's my favorite haiku that I've written.
Mm-hmm.
And now that haiku has always been possible, otherwise I couldn't have written it. But if it was always possible, then it was always there before I wrote it down, which means that I didn't create it, I just made it. And that's important, because to kind of take the mask off of creativity and expose creativity as just really making it raises the question, is there anything that we do actually create? And that was sort of the second epiphany on this rabbit trail, and that is, yes, there is one thing that we can actually create that nobody else can make, because anyone could have written that haiku, but there are a few things that we can create that nobody else can. And that is our choices. It's all based on our choices. If somebody else forces me to do something, that's not my choice anymore. That's their choice. But my choices are only mine, and nobody else can make my choices. And with those choices that only I can make, I can make a self, and I can choose how to love others. And what's really fascinating is, when we do that, when we choose to love how we want to love, when we choose to become the type of person we want to become, that we end up creating something that is really that has a uniqueness beyond the physicalness of the self. And that's why we get this sense in which people can't people can't love us the way that this person can love us. Only this person can love us in that way. And I shared the example of the movie Liar Liar, where Jim Carrey is doing the claw with his kid, and then the stepdad tries it, and it's not the same. And so what I get at there is that, look, there's so much stuff that we do and we make in the world that's not actually creativity. The real uniqueness of what we have is ourselves, the self that we create. That's the real masterpiece behind all the things that we make. And then I just kind of pointed at how that we kind of get a sense of that, because when we find art that we really like, a lot of times we have this compulsion to want to find out about the artist, who's the person behind this. And that's, I think, definitely the case. And so the who behind the art is the thing that's where our real creativity is. And what that means is that when we think of worship, when we think of giving God praise, saying God is worthy, well, the only thing that we can really give God that he doesn't already have is our allegiance, is our choice of him. It's our I do to God. And so what I argue in the sermon then is that the heart of worship is this allegiance, this I do to God. That's the fuel of worship. And that can be expressed in all of these different ways that God, has created all of these possibilities that we can make songs, we can make paintings, we can do dances. And those are all different ways that we can choose to express that core thing, which is our I do to God, our allegiance to God. And then I brought all that back to the scene with the elders, and I showed how all of the images that John chooses to use here are very intentional. As crazy as the scene is, he's very intentional with the images he uses, because at that time, you have all of these cities kind of sucking up to Rome, and they would create these statues of Caesar, and they would give these crowns to the statue to show their allegiance and their submission to Caesar. And that's exactly what John uses in his imagery to show that what the elders are doing forever and ever and ever is giving their allegiance to God. Now, the description of how that works, where they're playing the harp and they're balancing the bowls and they're doing all these monotonous things over and over and over again, that is just used to show how this is about allegiance. And so we can trust that heaven's not actually going to be this monotonous thing. But the one thing that is true and literal about that is that in heaven, our allegiance will be to God, not to Caesar. Our allegiance will be perpetual. Our fidelity will be, everlasting. And then I just took a couple takeaways from that, is that it's not our songs that are the worship. It's our allegiance to God expressed through song. So if you go to church, you can sing with the voices of angels, but if you haven't committed yourself to God, you're not worshiping. You're just singing. And then the final thing I said is that also means that when we're singing and we're expressing our allegiance to God, that's sort of like our battle cry, because this is a God that is at war, and he is calling us into this spiritual warfare. And so on Sunday morning, our worshiping music, that's sort of our battle cry, but it's not the battle. The battle is in our daily lives, where we live out our allegiance in the world, and we live as if we are in the throne room with God, even while we are in this very ungodly place. That is my summary, and I guess I left a bunch of stuff out, but that's kind of the heart of what I was getting at. So,
absolutely, thank you, Dan. If you guys weren't able to listen to Dan's sermon, I encourage you to go back and do so. Summary was great. It covered it very nicely, but there's nothing that can quite compare to just getting, like I like to say, the full shebang. So go ahead and check that out. Why did I thank you for your sermon? Well, first of all, because you had me worried for you, because I was like, what the heck is he going to say? And there was no need to worry. I'm not sure where pushback would have been. I know that and our team that talks about the sermons and all of that, I know that you were trying to talk about this idea of like, we don't really create. And I'm in those meetings, I was like, huh? Like, what are you talking about? But you took us through it. And so I want to say, I thank you for your sermon, because I think not everyone would get up and say, hey, there's this problem I'm having with this really important part of scripture. I'm going to say no thank you to that. I want to find a customer service booth and speak to a manager, please, if this is the way it's going to be. But for you to just be honest and vulnerable with that, but then take us through your process of how you went from not really enjoying that, you called it dread, to adoration, was just really helpful. And I suspect that would be helpful for others as well. So that's why I say thank you. I thought it was great. I love that you reminded us that we have to remember this text is not literal, because if it were, like, holy buckets, what in the world? Like, there's just so much that is just mind boggling. And even with understanding that it's not literal, there's still stuff that's mind boggling. And so that'll be part of the great surprise, I think, when we are actually like face to face and in that place. And then challenging us to look deeper, like, so what was John getting at? And pulling back the facade of creativity with your two epiphanies. Again, who else would get up and say, I had this epiphany and I'm going to share it with you, but then I had another epiphany that totally countered the first epiphany, and I'm going to share it with you. So great. Oh, so good. So yeah, your first epiphany, how we don't create anything, but we do make things. We make what is already possible. And that, I just hadn't thought of it in that way. And then it was kind of like a, ooh, nice turn of the page to say epiphany 2, what do we actually create? And that is our choice to align with him, our choice to give our allegiance to him, and how we express our choices with what we do make in the world. And then you did say nobody can be us. No one can love like we love or do the things that we do. And I just really, really appreciated that. And you said that we are the masterpiece that can enthrall God, using our free choices to create a godly self. And I just thought that was lovely. And so for that, I say thank you. And it actually, in that moment when I was listening and making some mental notes, my nugget came like right then. So I don't have to worry. Nice. I don't have to like, ooh, I got it. So, and it came very quickly from your sermon. And then finally, I appreciated that you ended with reminding us that there is a battle, because the God that we are giving our allegiance to is a God at war. It's not static, and there is a battle that we are a part of. And so I just thought that was great. And the reminder that God is a living God who gives us living water for a living faith. And so this living is something that we need to fight for, and fight against certain things that try to bring down this organic, cosmic, beautiful life that we live in the faith with God. So I thought it was really good. I can't imagine what you left out, and I want to give you a chance to do that. But if you want to respond to anything that stood out to me.
Well, it's fascinating, because when I was doing the sermon, when I was talking about my dread about heaven and the monotony of it all and the cuckoo clock nature of everything that was going on, there was a couple who got up and left. And I feel like they weren't smiling. They looked a little like, this is supposed to be a church. We should be, we shouldn't be complaining about heaven. And maybe they're right. And maybe I oversold my dread a little bit, but so I did notice that. And then,
I did too, Dan, but they probably just had a brunch reservation that they needed to.
Right.
Really
well,
quick.
And it's possible to, it's possible that it's possible they just didn't care for my style, and that's okay too. It doesn't bother me, but and then what was the other thing that you said? The second thing? Well, you said a few things, and I'll probably respond to them later. So, but thanks for those that feedback. Oh, I will say part of the risk, this is what I will say, part of the risk of the sermon, and Greg had a prior obligation on Saturday, so he wasn't there for the Saturday run through. And so I shared this idea about how we don't create anything, we just make things. I shared that with the corporate team earlier that week, and it was as if I had like dressed a hammer or an anvil up like a ballerina. They were just looking at it like, what are you talking about? What is that? You know?
Yeah.
And so, but I still felt like, no, there's something here. I just need to express it better. And so it took a big chance trying to get that idea through. And fortunately it came off better on Sunday than it did during our meeting earlier that week. But
no, yeah, I thought it was great. And this is what I'll say again. I truly believe people fully appreciate when we are just real, and the vulnerability and the transparency that comes in with that. And so to see one of our teaching pastors say, I was struggling with this, but this is my process by which I got to this point.
yeah.
I think it lets folks know, hey, it's okay. Just like we always encourage folks to ask questions, like dig in, like wrestle with stuff. And so yeah, good on you.
Definitely. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what got left on the cutting room floor?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things, but there's one thing that I'm going to talk about because it hurt. Sometimes you cut things out and you do it with tears in your eyes, and it's like a big dramatic scene, and you're saying, why, God, why? And why can't my sermon be an hour and a half? Why can't it be an hour and a half?
Why can't it be?
Yeah. I'm sure the people who are watching the kids in the daycare, they won't mind. Come on. So so I had this whole section where I dipped it into chapter 5, because when you get to chapter 5, and I think Greg is going to finally get to this scene this weekend, but there's this scroll, and God is holding this scroll, and John sees this scroll, and it's got these 7 seals on it, and nobody can open this scroll. Nobody in heaven, nobody on earth, and nobody under the earth. And that's fine. That's very consistent with a lot of the images, the 7 seals and the mysterious scroll. But what's weird is that because nobody can open the scroll, John has this total meltdown, and he just starts bawling like a baby. And so much so that this angel has to come over and say, calm down, man. What's wrong with you? It's just calm down. Well, so then the question is, well, what's on this scroll that would cause him to cry so much because it can't be opened? And then finally the angel says, just chill out a little bit. The Lamb is going to be able to open the scroll. And so what I think, and I think Greg agrees with this, and some of the other commentators that we've looked at agree with this, what the scroll is it's God's plan for dealing with the world, God's plan for punishing evil, God's plan for how he's going to win over the beast. And so the fact that nobody can open this means that nobody can put this into action. Nobody can enact it. Until the Lamb comes. Now suddenly God's plan can be executed. God's plan can live out. And what that means and how that relates to what I was saying is that if we live in this world and God is inviting us into allegiance with him, and we look around and we say, okay, this is this glorious God, this transcendent God who created everything, who is abounding in steadfast love, who is full of mercy, who is all about butterflies and all about, nature and all about all of these good things and love and all of that. And then you look around at this place that he supposedly created, and it's nothing like that. It's absolutely nothing like that. It's just an absolutely ungodly mess. And sometimes it's just pure evil, full of suffering, full of death, full of everything that God supposedly stands against. So when God says to enter into a covenant with him, to come and give your allegiance to him, this needs to be resolved. And if God can't resolve all the ungodliness in the world, well, that means we're stuck with Caesar, because if God can't solve these things, there's no reason for me not to give my allegiance to the side that's obviously winning, which is Caesar, and to do my best to get as much as I can while I'm here. And that is heartbreaking, because we know the emptiness and the cycle of violence and the futility and the suffering that ungodliness causes. And yet that makes the most sense if God doesn't have a solution for all of this stuff. And that's why John is weeping so much when nobody can open the scroll, when nobody can put God's plan into action. But now that the Lamb can open the scroll, that is, God can now put this plan into action. The reason why that's such profound good news is because now, no matter what it looks like here, it makes sense to give my allegiance to God because he has a plan for it and it is going to be executed. It is in process and the Lamb has fulfilled it. Now it's just a matter of time. And so by the Lamb being able to open the scroll, that allows me to give my allegiance to God. And that's why that's so beautiful and such good news for John. I had to cut a lot of that out, partly because it took too much time to break it down, and then partly because we weren't technically in chapter 5 yet. But man, it hurt. I wanted to talk about that so much. So
yeah, that would be hard to put on the brakes when you just really want to just zoom right on into that, because it's like, it's the good stuff, right? It's the good news. It's kind of like the redemptive part of it all. But we'll get there. We will get there, and we'll have time to chat about it. So that's amazing. I do have one question for you, and then we did get a comment that you want to. Oh, for the love!
Yay! All right.
We did get a comment that you'll address, and then we'll move into nugget time. And so I want to talk a bit about when you spoke about our allegiance, our choice. That is something that we have, that because God has given us free will, he didn't force, he didn't create, he doesn't, like, he lets us choose him. He wants us to choose him, but he lets us truly choose him or not. And then our life is all the choices that we make show that allegiance to him. And because of the text, you were using worship and art and haiku and poems and all of that as a form of expressing this allegiance. And I can just envision folks being like, I'm not wired for any of those things. I am not a Dan Kent who can write these brilliant haikus. Or the author, I wanted to make sure we said his name again.
Richard Wright.
Yes, Richard Wright, who wrote the book that has the haikus in it, also Black Boy and Native Son. So we want to definitely shout that name out. So for those who think I'm not wired, gifted that way, how can I express my allegiance to God? What would your encouragement to those folks be?
Well, the absolute best way to express your allegiance to God is to keep the commands. To, when Jesus told his disciples to go out and teach everyone to obey these commands and to basically live in this way. That's when our life is the greatest testimony. It's Paul says it's a love letter. Our life is a love letter. It shows our allegiance to God. It shows our heart and all of that. And so that's always the best way. And I think that there are so many different ways, and this is where the gifts of the Spirit kind of come in. And there are hospitality and teaching and comfort and all of those types of things are ways that we can express our allegiance. And then the other thing too is you certainly don't have to be a maker. You don't have to make the songs. You don't have to make the poetry. You don't have to make the paintings. Just going and experiencing those things, participating in the songs, reading the poetry, going and studying the art and contemplating it. Those are ways that you can kind of vicariously experience that expression. And really, as an artist, that is for good art, that is the goal of a good artist, and that is to create something that the audience can get something out that speaks to them. Bad art a lot of times is just self-expression, and there's a lot of that in every form of art. But like good art that I think is helpful for our relationship with God, at least, is art that's designed for us as consumers to get something out of and to get a return on our contemplative investment.
Awesome.
But hey, let me say this too. This is the collection, which I've talked about this on here
Hmm.
before because I just
Hmm.
like haiku so much. But uh, yeah, that was I I got a few people were really grateful that we talked about Richard Wright, and um
Love it.
yeah, so that was nice too, and I was glad about that. So
Amen. Amen. And if you want to ever see some of Dan's haikus, he posts them regularly on Instagram. So get
on Instagram, yeah. So yeah, I'm a
yeah.
little
Okay. So
behind on
Dan,
that.
oh, well, you better get on it. It's not like
Yeah.
you've been busy or anything. Let's talk. There was a comment. Well, I think it was emailed in to us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
I
you just
think
wanted to quick
I think
address
it
that.
was I think Wendy emailed the comment in, and
Mm-hmm.
she asked a
Mm-hmm.
really good question about how does the geographical plot of land that is Israel, how does that fit into what God is doing in the world and what God will do in
Mm-hmm.
the world, and what, as Christians, what should our posture be toward Israel and all of that, and I
Mm-hmm.
will just say that that's a really good and important question, but I will humbly kick that can down the road because I'm not I don't feel competent in my knowledge about everything that's going on there to not say something that can be turned into all sorts of different problems. And so what uh I would I would recommend pushing that question to Paul Eddy or Greg's inbox. But I'm not going to answer that. So I
Yeah.
hope that that's okay. But I don't want to diminish the importance of the question because I think
Yeah.
it's a good and important question. I just I am not willing to. I just gave a sermon that I thought I was going to get fired for. I don't want to
Yeah.
answer
We,
that.
yeah.
So
Yeah. We were, no, we're not doing that. And I will just say thank you for sending in the question. Yes, Wendy. And on the MuseCast, we really tried to, this is, stick to the sermons because
yeah,
there is so many things that we could
yeah,
talk about and go down. But that's why the focus of the show is the sermons and reactions to that and questions about that. So not diminishing the question. It's important. Thank you for sending it. We're just guiding you to a
yeah,
better place to get that answered or some
yeah.
insight on that.
Hey,
All right.
let me
So,
say
yeah.
one more thing before we move on to the next whatever. Um, I hope people. I'm assuming people know that like I'm tongue in cheek when I am worried about being fired. Which is not to say I couldn't screw up and lose my job. I'm not saying that, but uh, I tell you, Woodland Hills has been a great place where we really focus on this target model of truth, where we have this center, which is Christ, and a lot of the just basic Christian beliefs. But we do have a lot of flexibility, and we interact with stuff, and I love the intellectual freedom that we have at Woodland Hills,
Mhm.
and so I just say all that to say that I wasn't really worried about being fired
Yeah.
for this sermon, and it was mostly just for fun and to build intrigue. So
Mission accomplished. What is next for our little show on this particular day is something that we like to celebrate and call
nugget
Nugget
time!
Time.
Woo! All right.
Every week I give a different reason for why you get to choose whether you're going to give your nugget first or
Yeah.
last. This week's reason is you gave the sermon and you gave the summary and you tackled somewhat by kicking down the road Wendy's question. And so, because of all of those great feats, Dan, you get to choose whether you want to begin nugget time or conclude nugget time.
I have no strong compulsion, so I think I'm going to let the water bottle cap decide again.
Yes.
This is
Okay.
tails. Tails, I will go first. Heads, you can go
Okay.
first.
Okay. Sounds good.
Heads, you get to go first.
I get to go first. Okay, perfect. Like I said, this nugget, and this doesn't typically happen, came to me during your sermon. Your sermon was reminding me, especially at toward Epiphany, the end, and Epiphany 2 toward the end, when you were just talking about what we do create, which is our choices, and with that we choose whether or not we want to align ourselves and give our allegiance to God. And it reminded me of this song. It's an old Vineyard worship song, and it's by Tom Slater and Britton Brown, and it's called Let My Life Be Like a Love Song. And so I, of course, and I asked you this question, I began to think about, for all of us out in the world who are wondering, what is it that we can do with our choices to show this allegiance that we have to God? What would that look like if we don't particularly feel that we are talented in certain ways in which would obviously express that allegiance and help others express their allegiance? And so this song came to mind, and it's called Let My Life Be Like a Love Song. And I'm not going to like go through the whole song, but there's just a couple of verses. And it just starts out like, let my life be like a love song to your heart, oh God. And, it's, you know, Lord, the love you give so generously. Now I want to give just as I've received, to live a life that shines your love for those in need. Let the things I do and the words I speak reveal the awesome love you have shown to me. And so I truly believe that each of us are uniquely and beautifully made and created to do incredible things in the world. And many times those incredible things aren't the bombastic things that we are normally drawn to or gravitate towards. Many times those incredible things are those daily actions that we do as we're living our life, and ways in which that we are showing love to a neighbor, to someone we encounter in the community. Dan talked in his sermon about it's times when we choose love over hate. It's times that we choose to build up instead of tear down. It's times when we listen instead of like being so focused on speaking. And I think those are things that we cannot diminish, because they are huge and they are important. And it is all a way in which we are revealing our character, which we are hoping is becoming more and more like Christ. And so my encouragement to those who are wondering, like, what is my gift that I can offer? It is yourself. It is you. It is your life that you live, and the choices that you make to live in a way that his light and love would shine through you. And so don't poo-poo that. It's beautiful, it's incredible, and like Dan said, you are the masterpiece, and to choose to freely give of that is a gorgeous, beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's good. Now I wish that you would have finished with that, because that's really good. Stupid water bottle cap.
Stupid water bottle cap.
So okay, let your life be a love song.
Let your life be like a love song. Let
by
my life.
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
Oh.
Not that one.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Tom Slater, Britton Brown.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll say, speaking of idolizing musicians, one of the takeaways that I contemplated including, but I left it out, is we always talk at Woodland Hills about getting all of our life from Christ. And one of the things that's been helpful for me in thinking of the difference between making things and creating things is it puts making things and what we call creativity sort of in a proper perspective, because I do think that we tend to idolize artists, and we exalt artists, whether it's Taylor Swift or Vincent van Gogh or Richard Wright or whatever. We tend to think that there's something so profoundly special about them, and there is, I mean, because they're a child of God, but no more so than Margot at church. I mean, it's just that Margot could be just as much of a masterpiece as Taylor Swift. It's just that Taylor Swift is really good at this skill of making certain things that we like. But then when you start to study making things, you realize that what we think of as creativity a lot of times is just something that we haven't seen yet before, but had always existed. And so Taylor Swift is just really good at putting together these things that were always possible long before Taylor Swift. And it's sort of kind of, in my mind at least, helps me see art as a really good thing, but not something that is worthy of worship in and of itself.
Yeah.
Using it as a vehicle to express your devotion and allegiance to God is fantastic.
Mhm.
Expressing devotion and allegiance to art itself is foolish, and
Mhm.
so that, for me at least, it's helpful to see that, you know, we should not get our life from our art. We should use art as a way of expressing the life that God has given us, and I think that that's important because it's so easy to make an idol out of good things,
Yeah.
and we suffer for it because we miss out on the true source of creativity and where we have real creativity. And I feel so bad for these people who have such incredible skill at making art, but they've never actually done anything creative in their life, where their
Yeah.
life, they've just given into Caesar, or they've given into the ways of the world, and their personhood and their character has just sort of devolved into the flow of the system of self-centeredness of the world, and the ways of the principalities and powers, and they've never made like free creative choices to become more godly, and yet they paint pictures or they play music that they think is creative when in fact it's not. The real creative opportunity is to become that love letter. The real creative opportunity is to become this Christ-like self, and so it helps to move toward that true creativity
Mhm.
when we can see our common everyday, what we call creativity, for what it really is, which is just
Mhm.
making things. As beautiful and as fun as those things are, there's something better than that,
Mhm.
and getting our life from Christ is the way to go. So that is my
Amen.
nugget.
Put a bow on it. She's done. That was great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, you guys, for tuning in. Looking forward to chatting with you later on YouTube. Thank you for sending in your comments and your questions. They will be seen at MuseCast at whchurch.org. Yep, there we go. And we will be back at it next week because guess what? Chapter 5 is coming. Yay!
Yay.
And we're so excited about chapter 5. We're kind of like ignoring the fact there's like what, like, 18 more
Yeah, yeah,
after.
yeah, yeah,
No biggie, no biggie.
yeah,
So continue to tune in and circle back with us next week as we continue the conversation. Have a wonderful week, you all. Thanks so
yeah.
much.
Bye, guys.